Steve Bannon going in on fraud. He, of course, had federal charges on this, but he was pardoned by Donald Trump. And to be clear, this is the case where he was part of this. Well, let's play this clip of Bannon. This is actually, we got two clips of Bannon. But let's go. This is 2020 when Tucker Carlson was asking Steve Bannon about the wall crowdfunding project he had. This was to finish building the wall on the southern border. And the thing I love about this clip is they probably played it in the grand jury that indicted him. But here it is.
Conferences, we built a wall, 2/3 of a mile of wall up a mountain in El Paso within 100 days of starting. I was a contractor and ran an advisory board that brought together the best and brightest of all the wall people. So they're not going to criminalize, they're not going to shut me down about talking about the wall. They're not going to criminalize us talking about the wall. Okay. We brought in Kobach and Sheriff Clark and all these guys. So that's what the indictment failed to say. But look, all that'll come out in court over time. It will. And I don't. Is that they're not the key. Yeah, the key thing is they're not going to shut me. They want to criminalize political speech, and they're not going to shut me down.
And here is that's the shot, and here is, of course, the chaser. This happened yesterday in New York City.
For every conservative, this is what happens in the last days of a dying regime. They will never shut me up. They'll have to kill me first. I have not yet begun to fight.
Is that Churchill? Is that Churchill?
I think it's like Patrick Henry or something like that.
I wonder if they will forward his Seinfeld residuals to the jailhouse that he's in. I wonder if he gets those. But the guy's being arrested. Let's be clear. He's not being arrested for, espousing the need for a wall. He's being arrested for absconding with the money that he raised from people who wanted to build a wall. Like his own followers, he was stealing money from. That is the charges. And apparently he was pardoned on a federal level for these. I mean, does this get through to anybody, or is it just like we're going to see like free Bannon crowdfunding going now?
No, you most certainly are going to see free Bannon paraphernalia. That's why they want people like Herschel Walker and Marjorie Taylor Greene, people who either can't see the gaslighting or will be complicit with the gaslighting. Steve Bannon knows that whether he's guilty or not, he knows that this is not an issue of the First Amendment. But he also knows that all his audience needs to feel good and to go a little bit further is to feel as though he's a martyr. So that's why he's quoting every line he can remember to make it seem like he's being an honorable hero. And we all know he's an honorable man, don't we?
Someone on the IM is saying that Bannon, Jackson from Wisconsin, says that Bannon was quoting John Paul Jones. But let me ask you this. Don't you think what we're seeing with Bannon is the criminalization of crime in this country?
No, you have to understand, like the United States, honestly, this is actually kind of a shadow and a type of what's going on in this country in general. Steve Bannon is saying that no matter what he does, this system is not able to hold him accountable. It doesn't matter what law he breaks. He has the right to not be held accountable. And that's the spoiledness and the man-childishness of white supremacy and conservative men in this country right now. There is no lack of accountability. That's because, do we really expect them to hold each other accountable? Steve Bannon is saying, no, it doesn't matter what he did wrong. You can't hold him accountable.
It's fascinating to me to see this full-on assault that fascinating. I don't know if that's the right word. But it really is. I mean, if you step back and you see there is this, and I think it's basically, sort of a libertarian impulse that we're seeing from people who are sort of like the campus, ostensibly on the left, who are rising up and talking about the new authoritarianism that's coming from these companies and the FBI and the CIA and this and that. And I am extremely skeptical, to say the least, of the CIA and the FBI, of course, and of certain policies and programs that the State Department and our government has, and obviously the massive increase in the military budget and I do have some issues with the amount of money that we're pouring into a war that ostensibly we have no part of in Ukraine. But with that said, there is it seems to me, a difference. And this is where, like, even this, like, libertarian strain and ostensibly, sort of like maybe some of them dub themselves anti-imperialists as opposed to, like, they're campus. But you see, you mentioned this earlier, where the religious fundamentalists are anti-institutional. And the institution that they're against is the idea of a secular government, of a government.
That's right.
And when we see these libertarian attacks on the IRS, on the and lumping it in with the FBI and the CIA, it sort of gives away the game. Where it's what this is there is an assault on the concept of government, and it's no different in terms of its impact than Ronald Reagan getting up there and saying, like, the most dangerous words in the English language are, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help."
That's right.
It really is no difference. It has the exact same agenda, and it is a libertarian agenda that ultimately is trying to unshackle corporations, really, and money. And
right.
It also behooves, and the payoff for the religious fundamentalists and the theocrats is, we don't have to abide by civil rights laws. Basically,
That's right.
it's what it comes down to.
Right.
I mean, that's where these things sort of meet in the middle, and their agendas are perfectly. Sort of like they just fit together very nicely, even though they seem to be in disparate camps.
It's like the quote from Grover Norquist when I believe it was Norquist, when he said, we want to make the government small enough to put it in a bathtub and drown it.
Yep.
I think neoliberals and institutionalists took that as a metaphor. Obviously, it is a metaphor, but they're very serious about destroying the government by any means necessary, because the government itself is an impediment to their power, both economic power and political power. And it seems strange that they would say, okay, well, how do we have politics without a government? Easily. A theocracy will function just well for capitalism. It will function just right for the theocrats, and it'll function just fine for institutional Republicans who are willing to allow this country to be broken enough for theocrats to get in power.
Yep. I mean, I think this is how you get it. I mean, you there's been plenty of people who've written in the past that fascism in this country is going to come riding on a cross.
That's right.
And in many respects, what the campus and the libertarians do is weaken they don't need to assault the institutions in the same way that the religious fundamentalists do. They
That's
assault it, from some type of flanking maneuver, essentially, because all you need is this real sort of like cynicism towards even the concept of good government. When without a doubt, governments are flawed and problematic and this and that, but the direct assault on these on the idea of the IRS, for instance, like, yeah, you can have IRS that bad service, or they're only auditing, they're so stripped of resources that they're finding it easier to audit low income people than wealthy people, because low income people don't have the lawyers, the army of lawyers. But the answer is fund the IRS so they can go after wealthy people. The answer is get people in the executive branch who mandate that the IRS go after the money, as opposed to, the sort of like a low-hanging fruit, as it were. Go ahead.
I was going to say, this is where institutionalists now become complicit. This is where the Joe Bidens become and the Joe Manchins become complicit, because as they see this attack on the institutions that they swore an oath to protect, they feel like it's in the margin of error enough for them not to feel like it's a real threat. In other words, if they can't look in the same way I'm going to hold other Christians accountable with my efforts, if the neoliberals, liberals, Democrats, whoever, however you want to name them, if they are not willing to put white conservative men in check, because that is the very specific power group as defined by Bill O'Reilly from Fox News. He declared America's run by white Christian men. Well, if white Christian men like Joe Biden and Joe Manchin don't put their colleagues in check, then this system is going to collapse.